Poor girl crashes Millionaire'S party and makes his son stand up for the first time. The night was perfect until a poor girl crashed the most exclusive party in the city with a fake invitation. Without anyone noticing, she approaches the host's son, a boy who hasn't walked since the accident. In seconds, something inexplicable happens. He tries to stand up and succeeds. The ballroom freezes. The silence is absolute. And everyone wants to know, who is this girl? If this story interests you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. Let's continue. I promise this will be the best story you'll ever hear in your life. The ballroom sparkled like a crystal palace under the golden lights of imported chandeliers. White marble covered the floor, where hundreds of guests circulated with champagne flutes, their jewelry capturing reflections that danced across the walls. The air carried the expensive perfume of imported flowers mixed with the aroma of refined delicacies served on silver trays. It was the most important charity event of the year, where New York's elite gathered to celebrate their own generosity while raising funds for causes they would never visit personally. Among the designer gowns and tailored suits, a small, discreet figure passed through the ornate iron gates. Emily clutched tightly to the invitation she had so carefully forged, her hands trembling slightly as she showed the paper to the security guard. At 15, she had learned that survival sometimes required courage beyond the limits of the law. Her navy blue dress, mended lovingly by the skilled hands of Mrs. Jenkins, the neighbor who worked as a seamstress, contrasted drastically with the opulence surrounding her. Emily knew every name on the social lists, every face from the gossip magazines. She had studied for weeks, memorizing information about the Thompson family, the evening's hosts. She knew that Richard Thompson, the 70-year-old patriarch, had built an empire in real estate, that his wife Victoria collected contemporary art, and that their only son, Robert, managed the family foundation. But there was another family member who particularly interested Emily: Gabriel, the 16-year-old grandson who rarely appeared in public since the accident that changed his life 2 years ago. The car accident had left Gabriel with spinal injuries, confining him to a wheelchair. Since then, he had become a shadow of the cheerful child he used to be, isolating himself in medical treatments and physiotherapy, gradually losing his will to live. Emily had read about him in an old newspaper article, and something in his empty eyes in the photograph had touched a familiar wound in her heart. Emily moved discreetly among groups of guests, her presence practically invisible to those accustomed to seeing only their own reflection. She helped herself to a glass of water at a side table, trying to calm her nerves while looking for the right moment to act. In her dress pocket, she carried a handwritten letter on simple paper, each word carefully chosen during the sleepless nights of the previous week. The letter spoke about the inclusive dance center Hope, a small space in the Liberty District where Emily had volunteered since she was 12. There, children and teenagers with physical disabilities found in dance a form of expression and belonging. The place operated precariously in a rented warehouse, sustained only by the dedication of teacher Martha and the scarce donations from the community. The threat of eviction hung over them like a dark cloud, and Emily knew she needed a miracle to save the only place where these children felt truly free. Her eyes scanned the room until she found what she was looking for. In a more secluded corner, near the large windows overlooking the garden, Gabriel Thompson sat in his wheelchair, observing the party with the expression of someone watching life through a storefront window. He wore an impeccably cut dark suit, but his hunched shoulders and distant gaze revealed a soul in deep suffering. Emily took a deep breath, gathering all the courage she had learned to cultivate in the difficult streets of her childhood. She began to approach, but was interrupted by a firm hand on her shoulder. "Miss, may I see your invitation again?" The voice of head of security Mark was polite but inflexible. His experienced eyes had noticed something out of place about Emily's presence. "Of course, sir." Emily handed over the invitation with trembling hands, trying to maintain composure as he examined the paper under the light. Mark frowned, noticing small imperfections in the printing that his trained eye could detect. "This invitation... There's something strange here. I'll need you to come with me." Emily's heart raced. All the preparation, all the hope she carried for Center Hope, everything was about to crumble. But as Mark began to lead her toward the exit, she saw Gabriel again. The boy was watching her with curiosity, perhaps the first genuine emotion he had shown in months. "Please, whispered Emily, trying to buy time. "I just need 5 minutes. There's something important I need to do." "Girl, you shouldn't be here. This is a private event for selected guests." Mark maintained a professional tone, but there was a hint of understanding in his voice. At that moment, a providential distraction occurred. Victoria Thompson, the hostess, had dropped her purse near the appetizer table, scattering its contents across the marble floor. Several guests rushed to help, including some security guards. In the momentary confusion, Emily gently slipped away from Mark's arm and disappeared behind the velvet curtains that separated the main hall from the stage area. Her heart was beating so hard that she feared everyone could hear it. Hidden behind the curtains, she observed the movement in the hall through a small opening. Gabriel remained in his corner, now seeming even more isolated as the party continued around him. Emily noticed how people avoided approaching him, as if pain were contagious, or as if they didn't know how to deal with someone who had lost mobility. The background music stopped momentarily, and the evening's host announced that there would soon be a special presentation. It was now or never. Emily emerged from her hiding place and walked determinedly toward Gabriel, ignoring the curious glances that began to turn her way. "Hi," she said simply, stopping in front of the wheelchair. "My name is Emily." Gabriel looked up, surprised. For months, no one had addressed him so naturally without the tone of pity or discomfort that had become so familiar. "Hello," he replied hesitantly. "I know you don't know me, but I came here for a very special reason. I have something to show you." Emily took the letter from her pocket, but before she could hand it over, she felt Mark's hand on her shoulder again. "That's enough, girl. You need to leave." His voice was firmer this time, and other security guards began to approach, but Gabriel raised his hand, making a gesture that surprised everyone. "Wait," he said with a firmness he hadn't used in a long time. "I'd like to hear what she has to say." An uncomfortable silence settled in the circle that had formed around them. Some guests whispered among themselves, speculating about who this girl might be and why the young Thompson was defending her presence. Emily took advantage of the moment of hesitation and knelt beside Gabriel's chair, speaking softly so that only he could hear. "I work in a very special place, a place where children like you learn they can fly, even when the world says they can't walk." Gabriel's eyes shone with a spark of interest that hadn't appeared in 2 years. "Go on," he said, completely ignoring the tension around him. "It's a dance center, but not just any dance. It's a place where children with physical disabilities discover that their bodies can tell beautiful stories, even when they're different from what everyone expects." Emily handed him the letter. "We're about to close. We need help, not pity, but someone who understands that life can be beautiful in ways people never imagined." Gabriel took the letter with trembling hands, not from fear, but from an emotion he had forgotten existed: hope. As he read the first few lines, something changed in his expression. For the first time in 2 years, he leaned forward in his chair, engaged, alive. And it was at that moment that Richard Thompson, the family patriarch, appeared among the crowd of onlookers that had formed around his grandson. Richard Thompson made his way through the guests with the natural authority of someone who built an empire with his own hands. At 70, his presence still commanded respect and frequently fear. Impeccably combed grey hair, Italian suit that cost more than many families' annual salaries, and penetrating eyes that had sealed thousands of deals over the decades. When he reached the small circle formed around Gabriel, the silence intensified. "What's happening here?" His voice cut through the air like a blade, causing some guests to instinctively step back. Richard's eyes alternated between Emily, still kneeling beside the wheelchair, and Gabriel, who held the letter with an expression his grandfather hadn't seen in years. Mark, the head of security, quickly stepped forward. "Mr. Thompson, this girl infiltrated the party with a fake invitation. I was about to escort her out when young Gabriel asked to hear her out." "Fake?" Richard raised an eyebrow, his expression hardening. "Do you have any idea where you are, girl? This is a private residence, a private event. This is trespassing." Emily rose slowly, gathering all the dignity she could find. Despite the fear she felt, there was something bigger at stake. "I know I made a mistake coming here this way, sir, but I also know that sometimes rules need to be broken when it comes to saving lives." "Saving lives?" Richard repeated with a skeptical tone. What kind of teenage drama is this? It was Gabriel who answered, his voice stronger than it had been in months. Grandfather, she works at a dance center for children with disabilities. They're about to close. He raised the letter. I'm reading about it here, and it's extraordinary. Richard observed his grandson with surprise. For 2 years, since the accident, Gabriel barely spoke during family meals. He spent his days locked in his room, leaving only for physiotherapy sessions he reluctantly attended. Seeing that spark of interest in his eyes was something none of the expensive medical treatments had managed to evoke. Gabriel, you shouldn't get emotional with... Richard began, but was interrupted by Robert, his son, who approached with hurried steps. Dad, what's happening? The guests are commenting about some commotion. Robert Thompson, at 45, was a younger and less intimidating version of the patriarch. He managed the family foundation efficiently, but without the passion that characterized his father's business dealings. An intruder, Richard replied dryly. Mark, please resolve this discreetly. But before the security guard could move, Gabriel did something that shocked everyone. He placed his hands on the wheels of his chair and began to move. Not just move, but with a determination he hadn't shown in years. He positioned himself between Emily and the security guards as if protecting her. No, he said firmly, I want to hear more about this place. Victoria Thompson, who had joined the group after resolving the purse incident, gently touched her husband's arm. Richard, perhaps we should listen. Gabriel hasn't shown interest in anything for months. Emily realized this was her moment, not just her only chance to speak, but perhaps the last opportunity to save Center Hope. Mr. Thompson, I understand your irritation. I really did crash your party, and that was wrong. But I came here because I believe you, more than anyone, can understand what it means to give someone a second chance. A second chance? Richard frowned. Yes, Center Hope is a place where children the world considers broken discover they can still fly. Not figuratively, but literally. Through dance, they find a form of expression that goes beyond physical limitations. Emily looked directly at Gabriel. I'm sure you understand what it means when people start seeing you only for your wheelchair, not for who you really are. Gabriel nodded slowly, and for the first time in 2 years, a genuine smile began to form on his lips. She's right, grandfather. No one sees me as Gabriel anymore. I'm just the Thompson grandson who became paralyzed. The word paralyzed caused visible discomfort among everyone present. It was the first time Gabriel had spoken openly about his condition, without euphemisms or circumlocutions. Gabriel, Robert began, but was interrupted by his son. Dad, I know what I am. I know what happened to me, but maybe this girl is right. Maybe there's something beyond this. He looked at Emily. Tell me more about this center. Emily took a deep breath, realizing she had everyone's attention. Center Hope is in a rented warehouse in the Liberty District. Teacher Martha, who lost a leg in a workplace accident 10 years ago, transformed the space into something magical. There, children with cerebral palsy, amputations, visual impairments all dance together. It's not therapy, it's art. It's life. And why would you come to us? Asked Richard, his voice still skeptical, but with a slightly softer tone. Because you have a foundation that supports social causes, because you have resources that can save a place that's changing lives, and because, Emily hesitated, looking at Gabriel, because I believe you understand that sometimes the greatest wealth isn't in what we manage to keep standing, but in what we help to rise. Richard remained silent for a long moment. Around them, the party continued, but that small group had isolated itself in a bubble of tension and possibility. Finally, he addressed his grandson. Gabriel, do you really have an interest in this? Yes, grandfather. For the first time in 2 years, I'm interested in something. Gabriel looked at Emily with gratitude. I'd like to visit this place. All right, said Richard, surprising everyone. Mark, escort this girl out, but first get her contact information. He turned to Emily. Tomorrow I'll send a team to evaluate this center. If it's legitimate, perhaps we can talk. Emily felt tears of relief welling in her eyes. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Don't thank me yet, Richard cautioned. This is just an evaluation. I promise nothing beyond that. As Emily was discreetly escorted out, Gabriel remained in place, holding the letter as if it were treasure. For the first time in 2 years, he felt that perhaps there was a purpose beyond the pain, beyond the limitations, beyond the pity he saw in everyone's eyes around him. Robert approached his father. "Dad, are you sure about this? We don't know anything about this girl or this center. It could be a scam, an attempt to take advantage of our family." "It could be," agreed Richard. "But did you see your son? Did you see how he reacted? For 2 years, our most expensive doctors, our most qualified therapists, haven't been able to awaken in him even a tenth of the life that girl awakened in 5 minutes." Gabriel, overhearing the conversation, approached the 2 older generations of his family. "Dad, grandfather, I know you worry about me. I know you want to protect me, but you can't protect me from life itself. And maybe, just maybe, it's time for me to stop surviving and start living." Gabriel's words echoed in the silence that followed. Richard observed his grandson with a mixture of pride and melancholy. He saw in him echoes of his own son at the same age, when Robert still dreamed of being an architect before being molded to inherit the family business. "Very well," he finally said, "but we'll do this properly. Complete investigation, professional evaluation, and if we decide to support this center, it will be with all necessary safeguards." "I agree," said Gabriel, but there was a light in his eyes that wouldn't easily be extinguished. "Thank you for giving me this chance." As the family composed themselves and returned to circulate among the guests, none of them imagined that brief interaction would change not only the fate of Center Hope, but would also reveal family secrets that had remained buried for decades. The true reason Richard Thompson had agreed to evaluate the center wasn't just in Gabriel's reaction, but in a painful memory he had carried for more than 20 years about someone he had lost because he didn't have the courage to act when it mattered. The next morning, Richard Thompson was in his office before dawn, as had been his habit for more than 4 decades. The environment reflected the man who occupied it. Dark wood, heavy furniture, business trophies precisely aligned on the shelves like a military display. But his attention wasn't on the financial reports that normally demanded his first hour of the day. Instead, he fixed his gaze on an old photograph he had removed from a locked drawer. The image showed 2 children playing in a garden, himself at 10 years old and his younger sister Helen at 8. She was dancing barefoot on the grass, arms extended as if she were about to fly, while he watched her with a smile that hadn't visited his face in decades. Helen had been the only person who could make young Richard lower his guard, the only one who saw beyond the precocious seriousness that his parents demanded of their eldest son. The telephone's ring brought him back to the present. It was his executive assistant, Carl, informing him that the evaluation team was already on their way to Center Hope. Richard had personally chosen the professionals, a lawyer specializing in social organizations, a forensic accountant, and a social worker with experience in community projects. Clear instructions had been given, a complete evaluation without omissions. Meanwhile, in the Liberty District, Emily had arrived at the center even before teacher Martha. She had spent the night without sleeping, alternating between hope and terror. What if the evaluation team didn't like what they saw? What if they considered the place inadequate? What if all that was just a polite way for Gabriel and his family to get rid of her? The warehouse that housed Center Hope wasn't impressive to the eye. Exposed brick walls, cement floor, high ceiling with some leaks that were worked around with buckets on rainy days. But for the 23 children who frequented the place, it was a sanctuary. Mirrors donated by a dance studio that had closed decorated an entire wall. Colorful mats were scattered across the floor, and drawings made by the children created a gallery of dreams on the walls. Martha arrived at 7 in the morning, walking with her prosthetic leg with the elegance of someone who had transformed a limitation into strength. At 42, she radiated an energy that infected everyone around her. She had lost her leg in a workplace accident in a textile factory, but instead of giving in to despair, she discovered in dance a way to redefine her relationship with her own body. "Emily, dear, did you sleep here?" Martha immediately noticed the state of the girl, who had spent the night cleaning and organizing every inch of the space. "I couldn't sleep at home, teacher. They're coming today, the Thompson family team." Emily quickly explained the events of the previous night, including her confession about the fake invitation. Martha listened in silence, then pulled the girl into a tight hug. "You were very brave, Emily, but remember what I always say. We aren't defined by our mistakes, but by how we transform them into opportunities for growth." The first children began to arrive at 8:30. Lucas, 9 years old with cerebral palsy, arrived in a wheelchair pushed by his mother. Carla, 12, with a visual impairment, arrived with her white cane and a smile that lit up the room. Peter, 14, with his right leg amputated after a motorcycle accident, arrived with his sports prosthesis, ready for another morning of movement and freedom. At 9 o'clock sharp, the evaluation team arrived. 3 professionals in suits, clearly uncomfortable with the simple environment, but determined to fulfill their mission. Dr. Richard Sanders, the lawyer, began verifying documents and licenses. Sarah Lewis, the accountant, examined the precarious but organized financial records. And Dr. Marcia Taylor, the social worker, observed the interaction between the children and the teacher. "Teacher Martha," said Dr. Sanders, "I need to better understand how the project works. Do you have registration as a social organization? Is there medical supervision for the activities?" Martha explained patiently that they functioned as an informal community project, that families participated voluntarily, and that all children had regular medical follow-up at their respective healthcare institutions. "We aren't a rehabilitation center, doctor. We're a space for art and expression." "But you work with children with severe disabilities," intervened Sarah Lewis. "Doesn't that require constant, specialized supervision?" It was Peter who answered, approaching with his prosthesis. "Can I say something? I've been coming here for 2 years. Before I hid at home, I was ashamed to go out on the street. Here I learned that I can dance, that I can be beautiful, that I can make others smile. No doctor taught me that." The social worker, Dr. Taylor, made a note on her tablet. "And how do you ensure safety during activities?" "By observing, caring, respecting each person's limits," replied Martha. "It's no different from what any dance teacher does. The difference is that here, no one is seen as special or poor thing. They're just children dancing." The evaluation extended for 3 hours. The professionals watched a class, observed the facilities, talked with some families who came to pick up their children. Gradually, the initial rigidity gave way to a deeper understanding of what was happening in that space. At the end of the morning, Dr. Sanders gathered the team outside the warehouse. "There's no doubt that the work done here is significant," he said. "But from a legal and administrative standpoint, there are issues that need to be resolved for a foundation like the Thompsons to associate with the project." "Issues like what?" asked Martha, who had approached. "Legal formalization, safety protocols, professional supervision, financial accountability," enumerated Sarah Lewis. "It's not impossible, but it will require considerable restructuring." Emily felt her heart sink. All those bureaucratic demands could make the project unfeasible before it even had a chance to receive help. It was then that a discreet car parked in front of the warehouse. Gabriel Thompson emerged from the back seat, his wheelchair being carefully positioned by the driver. He had insisted on accompanying the evaluation against his parents' recommendation. "Gabriel," Emily ran to him, surprised and happy to see him there. "I said I would come," he smiled. "I couldn't miss seeing this place." Gabriel's presence immediately changed the group's dynamic. The children still at the location approached with curiosity, without the shyness they usually showed with unfamiliar adults. For them, Gabriel was just another young person in a wheelchair, like Lucas. "Want to see how we dance?" asked Carla, the girl with visual impairment. Gabriel looked at Martha, who nodded with a smile. "Sure, I'd love to." What happened in the following minutes would be remembered by all present as a moment of pure magic. Lucas, Peter, Carla, and other children who had remained at the location began an improvised presentation. There was no music, just the rhythm they created with claps and voices. Each child danced in their own way. Lucas moving his arms in his chair, Peter balancing gracefully with his prosthesis, Carla following the sound with fluid movements. Gabriel watched, hypnotized. It was the first time he saw children with disabilities not as patients or victims, but as artists. Gradually, almost without realizing, he began to move his hands to the rhythm of the improvised music, then his arms, and finally, for the first time in 2 years, he smiled not out of politeness or to reassure adults, but from pure joy. "Can I try?" he asked timidly. "Of course," said Peter, positioning himself beside Gabriel's chair. "You don't need to know anything, you just need to feel." What followed was the breaking of all barriers that Gabriel had built around himself. He moved, laughed, made mistakes, tried again. It wasn't dance in the traditional sense, but it was expression. It was life. It was the discovery that his body could still create beauty. The evaluation team observed in silence, and even the most skeptical professionals, began to understand that they were witnessing something that transcended spreadsheets and regulations. When the improvised presentation ended, Gabriel's eyes were full of tears. "I didn't know," he whispered to Emily. "I didn't know it was still possible to feel this." Dr. Taylor approached Martha. "Teacher, I take back everything I thought before. You don't need medical supervision. You're practicing medicine in the best possible way." Dr. Sanders put away his documents. "I'll recommend to Mr. Thompson that he support this project. We'll help with legal formalization, but without altering the essence of what you do here." Gabriel remained at the center until late afternoon, participating in activities, talking with the children, rediscovering pieces of himself he thought he had lost forever. When he finally prepared to leave, he pulled Emily aside. "Thank you," he said simply. "How gave me back something I thought I had lost." "What?" asked Emily. "Hope." But as Gabriel returned home with a lighter heart than he had experienced in years, he didn't know that his decision to support Center Hope would awaken unexpected resistance within his own family, and that his grandfather's buried past was about to surface in a way that would change everything. 3 days after the visit to Center Hope, Richard Thompson faced the biggest family crisis in decades. News that he was considering supporting the project had leaked to the social press, generating an avalanche of criticism and speculation. Entire columns questioned if the King of Concrete was softening in his old age, and some of his oldest partners had called expressing concern about the company's image. Worse still, his executive assistant Carl had articulated a silent campaign against the project. He argued that associating the Thompson brand with an irregular warehouse in the center of the city was an unnecessary risk. He had even suggested that Gabriel was being emotionally manipulated by a clever miner who knew exactly how to exploit the young man's vulnerable situation. "Mr. Thompson," said Carl during a morning meeting, "we've received a report from the City Hall. There are irregularities in the permit for the location where this center operates, safety issues, lack of proper documentation. If we support this project and something happens, our responsibility will be total." Richard studied the report with growing discomfort. He knew Carl was right from a legal and business perspective. Decades of experience had taught him that decisions based on emotion rarely ended well in business, but the image of Gabriel genuinely smiling for the first time in 2 years persisted in his mind. "Schedule a meeting with the family," he finally said. "Tonight. We need to discuss this properly." Meanwhile, at Center Hope, Emily faced her own challenges. Teacher Martha had fallen ill with a severe flu, and she was trying to keep activities running with the help of 2 volunteer mothers. The children were restless, anxious for news about the possible support from the Thompson family. "Emily," said Lucas, the 9-year-old boy with cerebral palsy, "is Gabriel coming back? He promised he would learn the chair dance with me." "I don't know, Lucas. I hope so." Emily tried to maintain optimism, but the latest news she had received was not encouraging. A journalist had called asking about the scandal of the fake invitation, and she had learned there was pressure for the Thompsons to distance themselves from the project. In the afternoon, she received an unexpected call. It was Gabriel, and his voice sounded tense. "Emily, I need to tell you something. Tonight there will be a meeting at my house about the center. My father is very concerned about the repercussions in the press, and my grandfather's assistant is campaigning against the project." "I understand," said Emily, trying to hide her disappointment. "You have a lot to lose by associating with us." "No, you don't understand. I'm not going to let this happen." The determination in Gabriel's voice surprised her. "You gave me back my life, Emily. Not just to me, but to my entire family. My grandfather has been different since he visited the center. More human, more himself." "What do you mean?" "There's something he hasn't told anyone, about why he agreed to evaluate the project, about someone from his past." Gabriel paused. "I discovered it by accident. There's a locked drawer in his office, and yesterday it was open. I saw photographs, letters, of a sister he had." Emily felt her heart race. "A sister?" "Yes, Helen. She was younger than him, and from what I read in the letters, she dreamed of creating something exactly like Center Hope, a place where different people could express themselves through art. But she left very young, and he never did anything to support her dream." "Gabriel, what are you thinking of doing?" "I'm going to the meeting tonight, and I'm going to tell the whole family the truth about why this project is important, Not just for the children at the center, not just for me, but for my grandfather too. He needs this chance to honor his sister's memory. The meeting at the Thompson mansion was tense from the start. Robert, Victoria, Richard and Gabriel gathered in the library, with Carl present to present his evidence against the project. The heavy atmosphere contrasted with the elegance of the place. Walls covered with rare books, antique furniture, and a family portrait showing generations of successful Thompsons. "Dad," Robert began, "I know you appreciate this project because of Gabriel's reaction, but we need to be rational. The risks are very high." "What risks?" asked Gabriel, interrupting before his grandfather could respond. Carl opened his folder. "Legal issues, young Gabriel. Irregularities in documentation, problems with City Hall, and mainly the association of our brand with a project that could generate legal liabilities." "You're talking about children, Carl. Children who have found a place to be happy," Gabriel responded with growing firmness. "I'm talking about business, Gabriel, about reputation, about responsibility." It was then that Gabriel turned to his grandfather. "Grandfather, can I ask a question? Who was Helen?" The silence that followed was deafening. Richard turned pale, and Victoria and Robert looked at each other in confusion. "Gabriel, how did you—" Richard began. "I found her letters in your office. I read about her dreams, about the project she wanted to create, a place where people with differences could express themselves through art." Gabriel looked directly into his grandfather's eyes. "She dreamed of something exactly like Center Hope, didn't she?" Richard rose slowly, walking to the window. For a long moment, he observed the garden where decades before he had played with his younger sister. She was special," he finally said, his voice heavy with emotion. 2 years younger than me, but infinitely braver. She saw beauty where I saw problems. She saw possibilities where I saw obstacles. "Dad, I never knew you had a sister," said Robert softly, "because it was too painful to talk about her." Richard turned to face his family. "Helen had a severe hearing impairment. Our parents, you know how the mentality was back then, tried to correct her in every possible way. Treatments, surgeries, special schools. But she had found her own way to communicate with the world, through dance." Victoria touched her husband's arm. "What happened to her?" "She dreamed of creating a space where children like her could express themselves freely. She wrote letters to me for years, asking for support, asking me to use my influence to help her when I became an adult." Richard closed his eyes. "But I was too busy building this empire, too concerned with what people would think, too focused on being the responsible son our parents expected." "Grandfather," Gabriel whispered, "she left us at 23, an aneurysm. She never had the chance to realize her dream because I was too cowardly to support her." Richard looked at Gabriel. "When I saw you react to that girl, when I saw the light return to your eyes, I understood that this was my chance, not just to help you, but to finally do what I should have done for Helen 40 years ago." Carl tried to intervene. "Mr. Thompson, with all due respect, business decisions cannot be based on—" "Silence," said Richard, with an authority that made everyone quiet down. "I've spent my entire life building an empire, accumulating wealth, gaining respect. But never, not once, have I used all this for something that really mattered, for something that would honor the memory of the person I loved most in this world." Robert approached his father. "Dad, if this is what you want, we'll support you. But we need to do it the right way." "Exactly," agreed Richard. "We won't just support Center Hope. We'll transform it into the Helen Thompson Memorial. We'll regularize all the documentation, expand the facilities, but without altering the essence of what Martha and Emily have built." Gabriel felt tears of joy streaming down his face. "Can I call Emily and tell her?" "You can. And tell her that tomorrow I want to personally meet each child at that center. I want to know their names, their dreams, their stories." Carl made one last attempt. "Mr. Thompson, this is going to be very expensive, and the risks—" "Carl," Richard interrupted him, "you're fired. Someone who cannot see the value of restoring joy to a child has no place in my company." 3 months later, the old warehouse had been transformed into a space worthy of Helen Thompson's dreams. Special flooring for wheelchair users, adapted dance equipment, professional mirrors, and a complete physiotherapy gym. But the children's drawings remained on the walls, and the welcoming spirit of the place remained intact. At the inauguration ceremony, Emily and Gabriel took the stage together, not to give speeches, but to dance, she standing, he in his wheelchair moving in a choreography they had created together. It was imperfect, it was unconventional, but it was beautiful because it was real. When they finished, Gabriel took the microphone. "A few months ago, I thought my life was over, that there was nothing left for me beyond medical treatments and pity from others. But a brave girl taught me that we don't dance just with our feet. We dance with our hearts, with our souls, with everything we are." He looked at Emily, who stood beside him with shining eyes. "And if anyone here is feeling lost, hopeless, without reasons to smile, know that this place will always have its doors open, because here you will learn that no matter how different we are, we can all fly." The audience erupted in applause, but the most emotional moment was when Richard stood up and began to clap, tears streaming freely down his face. For the first time in 40 years, he felt that Helen would be proud of him. And so, a poor girl who crashed a party with a fake invitation not only saved a dance center, but also healed family wounds that seemed incurable and proved that sometimes the greatest miracles begin with the smallest gesture of courage. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Emily and Gabriel has touched you deeply. Just as a courageous girl transformed lives with a simple gesture of hope, you too can make a difference in the world around you. To continue this emotional journey with us, we've prepared a special playlist with equally inspiring stories. Find it here by clicking to your left. If this story warmed your hearts, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave your like on the video. Every day we bring unique narratives that explore the beauty of the human condition and the transformative power of compassion. Don't miss our upcoming content and tell us in the comments, what was the moment that moved you most in this story? We're waiting to share more adventures of the heart with you.